Stephen King story that's been adapted more than once. Stephen King is second to only William Shakespeare when it comes to having more film and television adaptations of his books than any other author in history. That isn't just because the man is so prolific that he's written over 60 novels throughout his career. It's because so many of those infamous stories have been adapted not once but twice, and sometimes even more. While the overall quality of Stephen King's adaptations can vary from all-time masterpieces to films you probably wouldn't watch again, even if someone paid you, there's no denying that the style and tone of King's ideas are tailor-made for the big and small screens, with upcoming reimaginings of popular properties like Christine and The Running Man in development, and a remake of Salem's Lot set to hit theaters in 2024. Let's look back at the many Stephen King stories that have been adapted more than once. Stephen King's third novel, The Shining, became arguably the most successful of all his adaptations when acclaimed filmmaker Stanley Kubrick got his hands on the material, and the author himself will definitely argue that point. Based on autobiographical elements of a struggling writer recovering from alcohol addiction, this story of a man succumbing to his addictions and madness became one of the most influential horror films ever made, thanks to the incredible and oppressive atmosphere Kubrick was able to cultivate. King sees the problem with that first adaptation as straying too far from his original premise and turning the character of Jack Torrance into a monster from the start. So King penned a television adaptation of The Shining for ABC in 1997 to rectify that mistake. Far more faithful to its source material, Jack is finally presented as a decent man driven to madness by his own figurative and literal ghosts in this version of events. The problem is that as fair. Trucks is a short story by Stephen King, published in 1973. King used it as the basis for his first, and only, directorial effort, Maximum Overdrive, which hit theaters in 1986. With that being King's only time stepping behind the camera, his novice-like nature was on full display, and the result was a goofy and much maligned final product that no one, not even the author, was happy with. A little over 10 years later, the USA network adapted Trucks into a TV movie with the same title as the short story. Much less campy than King's version of the events, this adaptation took the premise of trucks coming to life and terrorizing people at a gas station far too seriously, resulting in a dull and lifeless film. Stephen King adaptations had a lot going for them in the 1980s, in that they were often helmed by some of the world's most talented filmmakers. Case in point, in 1983, Canadian legend David Cronenberg stepped behind the camera to direct an adaptation of King's novel, The Dead Zone, starring Christopher Walken as the haunted psychic protagonist trying to stop a political assassination. This is one of the few adaptations of King's work in which everyone seemed happy with the final result, including King, audiences, and critics. That sort of success begs the question of why anyone thought a remake was necessary in the first place. Regardless, in 2002, The Dead Zone was reconceptualized as a television series for the USA Network, starring Anthony Michael Hall in the lead role of Johnny. Surprisingly thrilling to watch, this version of the story turned into one of King's most successful television ventures and lasted for 6 seasons, airing from 2002 to 2007.